The message arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. In the 50 years since humanity had reached the stars, they had never received anything like it. The giant screens at Earth Defense Command headquarters lit up with strange symbols that quickly transformed into English text, an invitation to join the Galactic Council. Ambassador James Thompson stood at the window of his office, looking out over the gleaming spires of New Washington. At 62, he had spent his entire career preparing Earth for this moment. His weathered face reflected in the glass as he watched the morning sun paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "They're really inviting us?" he asked, turning to face General Adams, who sat rigidly in one of the office's leather chairs. "Yes, sir. After 50 years of watching us from the shadows, they finally decided we're worthy of consideration." The general's tone carried a hint of bitterness. "Though I must say, their timing is interesting." Thompson knew what he meant. In the past decade, human colonies had expanded rapidly, pushing into resource-rich systems that the Council had previously ignored. Now, suddenly, they wanted to talk. "The President has chosen you as our representative," Adams continued, sliding a data pad across the desk. "You leave in 3 days." Thompson picked up the pad, scanning through the mission details. The Council station orbited a neutral star, far from both human and Council space. A fitting place for first contact, he supposed. That evening, Thompson sat in his garden with his wife Mary and their daughter Lisa. The artificial weather controllers had created a perfect spring night, with just enough breeze to rustle the leaves of the oak tree they had planted 20 years ago. "I don't trust them," Lisa said, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. At 28, she worked in Earth's diplomatic corps, following in her father's footsteps. "We've sent 17 requests for diplomatic contact in the past 5 years. Why respond now?" "Because we're finally strong enough to matter," Thompson replied, watching a shooting star, probably a defense satellite, cross the sky, or dangerous enough to worry them. Mary reached over and squeezed his hand. "Just be careful, James. We know nothing about these beings except that they've been watching us for half a century without saying hello. That's not exactly neighborly behavior." Thompson nodded, thinking about the classified reports he'd read. The Council claimed to represent 37 spacefaring species, but humans had only ever encountered their automated probe ships and warning beacons. Something about that had always bothered him. The next 2 days passed in a blur of briefings and preparations. Thompson memorized what little they knew about Council protocol, studied the basics of 6 different alien languages, and reviewed Earth's negotiating positions on everything from trade rights to colonial expansion. On the morning of his departure, Thompson stood in the launch bay of the diplomatic vessel Hope's Journey. The ship was Earth's finest, a perfect blend of elegance and hidden strength. Like humanity itself, it appeared less capable than it truly was. "Final checks complete, Ambassador," Captain Miller reported, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. "We're ready when you are." Thompson took one last look at the farewell party. Mary and Lisa stood with the President and Joint Chiefs, all trying to maintain professional expressions. He smiled, gave a simple wave, and turned to board the ship. As the airlock cycled, Thompson thought about humanity's journey to this point. From their first hesitant steps into space to their current network of thriving colonies, humans had proven themselves resourceful and determined. Whatever the Council's true intentions, he would make sure they understood that humanity had earned its place among the stars. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Thompson felt the subtle shift as artificial gravity engaged. Through the viewport, he watched Earth grow smaller, its blue-white surface gleaming like a jewel against the black of space. "Course plotted for Council Station," the navigator announced. "Transit time, 6 days." Thompson settled into his chair, already planning his approach to the negotiations ahead. He had no way of knowing that in less than 2 weeks, his death would spark the greatest war the galaxy had ever seen. The Council Station hung in space like a giant metal flower, its silver petals stretching out for miles. Thompson stood at the viewing window of Hope's journey, as they approached, trying to calm his racing heart. Something about the station's beauty felt wrong, like a Venus flytrap waiting for its prey. Docking permission granted, Captain Miller announced. They're directing us to Bay 47. As Thompson walked down the arrival tunnel, he noticed the air had a sweet metallic taste. Two tall aliens waited at the other end, their blue-tinted skin and long necks marking them as members of the elder races. They wore elaborate robes covered in blinking lights. Ambassador Thompson, the taller one said, its translator making the words sound flat. I am Guide First. This is Guide Second. We will show you to your quarters. Thompson nodded politely, but his diplomatic training screamed warnings at him. No welcome ceremony. No other ambassadors. No media. This wasn't protocol. This was something else. The halls they walked through were strangely empty. Thompson saw cleaning robots and automated systems, but almost no other beings. For a station that supposedly housed representatives from 37 species, it felt like a ghost town. Your quarters, Guide First announced, stopping at a plain door. The first council session begins in 6 hours. Do not leave until summoned. Once alone, Thompson activated his secure communicator. Captain Miller, are you receiving? Yes, sir. Signal is clear, but something's interfering with our other systems. Half our sensors have gone dark since docking. Keep the engines ready, Thompson said quietly. I don't like this. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Outside stood a small, green-skinned alien with large eyes. Ambassador, it whispered, looking nervous. I am Representative Third of the Rim Worlds. May I enter? Quickly, please. Thompson let the alien in, noting how it checked the hallway before entering. I came to warn you, Third said, its translator barely above a whisper. The elder races, they are angry about your colonies. The new ones, in the spiral arm. They had plans for those systems. Those systems were empty, Thompson replied. We searched thoroughly before settling. Third made a sound like sad laughter. Empty because they were being saved. The elder races, they take systems with good resources, keep them empty until needed. Your people took 12 such systems in 3 years. Thompson felt his stomach tighten. Are you saying this invitation isn't about membership? They will offer you a choice in the council session, Third continued. Abandon the colonies or face sanctions. But the alien looked around fearfully. I have seen their private sessions. They want to make an example. They think humans are too dangerous to be allowed to grow stronger. Thompson walked to the window, looking out at the endless stars. Why are you telling me this? Because my people were once like yours, Third said. We expanded too quickly. They made an example of us too. Now we live on resource-poor worlds, barely surviving. I cannot stop what they plan, but I can warn you. After Third left, Thompson spent the next few hours sending coded messages back to his ship and Earth. He detailed everything he'd learned and everything he suspected. If Third was right, humanity needed to be ready. When the summons finally came, Thompson straightened his uniform and checked his emergency beacon one last time. As he walked toward the council chamber, he noticed more beings in the halls now, all watching him with expressions that ranged from pity to barely hidden satisfaction. The council chamber doors looked like they were made of solid gold, stretching 3 stories high. Guide First and Second waited beside them. Remember, Ambassador, Guide First said as the doors began to open. The council's decisions are always unanimous and final. Thompson took a deep breath and stepped forward. The chamber beyond was vast and circular, with raised seats holding representatives of the most powerful species in known space. All of them looked down at the single small platform where he would stand. As the doors closed behind him with a heavy thud, Thompson realized he could no longer hear the station's air circulation systems. The council chamber's lights dimmed as Thompson stood on the small platform. Above him, hundreds of alien faces looked down from their elevated seats. Their eyes glowed in the darkness like stars cold and distant. Ambassador James Thompson of Earth. The High Speaker's voice boomed through the chamber. The creature's long, serpentine neck rose above the others, its scaled skin reflecting the dim light. You stand before the Galactic Council seeking membership for your species. That is correct, Thompson replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. He could feel the weight of the data crystal in his pocket, the one containing all the evidence he'd gathered in the past 6 hours. Before we proceed with your petition, the High Speaker continued, do you have anything to present to the Council? This was it. Thompson took a deep breath. I do, High Speaker. I wish to present evidence of Council violations of its own founding laws. A murmur ran through the chamber. Thompson pulled out the data crystal and held it up. The projector beam caught it, and suddenly the chamber was filled with floating images and text. These records show systematic suppression of developing species. Thompson's voice grew stronger. Deliberate resource hoarding. Staged accidents to eliminate competition. Forced relocation of populations. He pointed to specific documents floating around him, all signed and approved by this council. You dare? One of the elder race representatives stood, their robes flashing angry red patterns. This is an insult, Toe. This is the truth, Thompson cut in. And humanity will not be another victim of your corruption. We. The High Speaker's voice sliced through the growing chaos. Guards, seal the chamber. It seems we must make an example. Again. Heavy metal shutters slammed down over the chamber's doors. Thompson's hand went to his emergency beacon, but nothing happened when he pressed it. Your primitive devices have been disabled, the High Speaker said, almost gently. Now, let us show you what happens to those who threaten the order we have maintained for 10,000 years. Thompson heard a hissing sound. The air took on a strange, sharp smell. Captain Miller, he called into his communicator. Are you receiving? Yes, sir. Miller's voice crackled with static. We're picking up dangerous chemical readings in the chamber. We're trying to override their systems. But broadcast everything, Thompson ordered, feeling his skin begin to burn. Make sure Earth sees all of it. The air itself seemed to catch fire. Thompson could see his uniform starting to smoke, could feel his flesh beginning to blister. But he forced himself to stand straight, looking directly at the High Speaker. Remember this, he said, his voice raw but clear enough for the communicator to pick up. Remember what they did. Remember why. And when the time comes, he stumbled but caught himself. When the time comes, remind them why humanity survived every challenge we ever faced. The pain was beyond bearing now. Through streaming eyes, Thompson could see the council members watching him passively as his skin blackened and peeled. None of them moved to help. None even looked away. Hope's journey. Get out of here, he managed to gasp. Get the recording to Earth. That's an ord. The rest of his words were lost in a scream as the chemical fire reached his lungs. His last thought, as consciousness faded, was of Mary and Lisa. At least they would know he died standing up for what was right. Up in the observation rings, Representative Third watched with horror as Thompson's body finally collapsed. The human had known this might happen. Third's warning had made that clear, but instead of running, he had chosen to expose the Council's crimes to every human observation ship in range. As Third watched the Earth ship Hope's Journey make a desperate break for open space, pursued by Council vessels, a strange thought occurred to them. Perhaps the elder races were right to fear humans after all, but not for the reasons they imagined. Because Third had seen the look in Thompson's eyes at the end, it wasn't fear or pain or even hatred. It was triumph. The recording of Thompson's death played on every screen on Earth. In homes, offices, and public squares, billions watched in stunned silence as their ambassador burned alive. When it ended, that silence turned to rage. Admiral Robert Wells stood in Earth Defense Command's main control room, watching as emergency signals lit up across human space. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the command rail so hard his knuckles turned white. Sir, his communications officer spoke up, We're receiving responses from all colonies. They're asking for war authorization. Wells nodded. He'd known humanity's response the moment he'd seen Thompson's final moments. What about the Council? They've sent a message, sir. They say. The officer's voice shook with anger. They say this was a legal execution of a disruptive element, and that humanity should learn its place. The main door slid open. The president walked in, followed by the leaders of Earth's major powers. Their faces were grim. The vote was unanimous, the president said. For the first time in human history, every nation, every colony, every settlement agrees. We're at war. Wells turned to his tactical display. They think we're primitive. They think we're weak. Let's show them how wrong they are. He pressed a button, and a new image appeared. Blueprints labeled Project Phoenix. We've been preparing for something like this for years, Wells explained. The Council relies on energy shields, AI-driven ships, and advanced targeting systems. But we found their weakness. The display showed simple nuclear weapons, modified for space combat. Their shields can't handle old-fashioned nuclear blasts. Their AIs can't predict primitive ballistic trajectories. And their targeting systems. He allowed himself a small smile. They never developed countermeasures for kinetic weapons. Why would they? It's too primitive for their taste. How long until we can launch? One of the world leaders asked. Our forces are already moving, Wells replied. We started the moment Hope's Journey broadcast Thompson's warning. Every colony is activating its defense systems. Every shipyard is switching to war production. And our sleeper agents in Council space are about to wake up. The tactical display lit up with hundreds of red dots, Council military installations, and supply lines. Next to each one, a small note detailed their weaknesses, their patrol schedules, their defense capabilities. Thompson didn't just expose their crimes, Wells continued. He confirmed what our intelligence suggested. The Council is corrupt, complacent, and completely unprepared for a real war. They haven't fought one in thousands of years. They just bully younger species into submission. And now they try to bully us, the president said quietly. Yes, sir. But unlike those other species, we're ready to hit back. Hard. The display changed again, showing the faces of other alien representatives, species who had suffered under Council rule. Many had already sent secret messages supporting Earth's cause. The Council thinks this will be a simple punishment operation, Wells said. They'll expect us to cower, to abandon our colonies, to submit like all the others did. Instead, he typed a command, and the display showed Earth's full battle plan. Instead, we're going to tear their corrupt empire apart. In orbit, the first waves of Earth's ships were already moving out. Not the sleek diplomatic vessels the Council knew about, but heavy warships that had been built in secret, deep in asteroid belts and hidden shipyards. On every colony world, missile silos opened. Defense platforms powered up. Civilian ships began converting to military use, adding the weapons they'd carried hidden behind false panels. In her office at the diplomatic court, Lisa Thompson watched her father's final moments one more time. She touched the screen gently when it showed his face. They thought killing you would break us, Dad, she whispered. Instead, you gave us exactly what we needed. Proof of their crimes, proof of their weaknesses, and a reason to strike first. Across human space, a simple message flashed on every military channel. Remember, respond. The war had begun. The Council's largest supply depot hung in space above a gas giant, its massive storage rings glowing with shield energy. The facility's AI systems monitored space for thousands of miles around, ready to detect any advanced ship drives or energy weapons. They weren't looking for rocks. The first asteroid hit the outer shield at 20% of light speed. The impact overloaded the shield generators instantly. Before the facility's automated alerts could even sound, 50 more followed, each one precisely aimed. Admiral Wells watched the attack feed from his command ship, hidden in the shadow of a nearby moon. Status: direct hits on all primary targets, his tactical officer reported. Their shields never stood a chance against kinetic impacts at that speed. Their AI didn't even recognize the asteroids as weapons until impact. Wells nodded. Similar attacks were happening across Council space. Humanity's ships had spent weeks positioning simple chunks of rock, using basic thruster pods to aim them. No complex drives, no energy signatures, just physics and patience. Second phase, Wells ordered. Across the system, hundreds of supposedly civilian mining ships dropped their fake outer hulls, revealing missile batteries and gun ports. They'd been hiding in plain sight for months, dismissed by the Council as primitive resource gatherers. The depot's remaining defenses targeted the approaching ships, expecting energy weapons. Instead, the human fleet fired old-fashioned nuclear missiles, technology so ancient that the Council's defensive AI had no recognition protocols for them. Their automated defenses are trying to adapt, the tactical officer reported with grim satisfaction. But they can't predict the missile paths. Their targeting systems are designed for energy weapons and smart projectiles, not ballistic trajectories. The nuclear explosions turned space into false day. When the light faded, the Council's greatest supply depot was a spreading field of debris. Wells opened a channel to all human ships. Phase 3. Begin resource capture. Specialized teams moved in, collecting the scattered supplies and raw materials. Everything would be used to fuel humanity's war effort. On the other side of Council space, similar scenes played out. Humanity struck 60 major targets in the first hour alone. Supply lines shattered. Communication relays went dark. Defensive stations discovered that their mighty energy shields meant nothing against simple kinetic weapons moving at relativistic speeds. In the Council's emergency session chamber, the High Speaker raged at his military commanders. How are they doing this? They're primitives. Their technology is centuries behind ours. That's exactly the problem. One commander admitted. Our defenses are designed to stop modern weapons. These humans, they're using technologies so old we never thought to defend against them. Nuclear weapons, kinetic strikes, even their battle tactics are unpredictable because they're not using AI combat systems. Another explosion rocked the chamber. On the main display, a Council battleship died under a swarm of simple nuclear missiles. Its advanced targeting systems, designed to track energy weapons, couldn't lock onto the primitive ballistic weapons. We've lost contact with the Outer Ring colonies, a communications officer reported. Human ships are using our own supply lines to move undetected. They're attacking everywhere at once. The High Speaker slumped in his chair. In just 6 hours, humanity had done more damage than any species had managed in 10,000 years. Back on his command ship, Wells received word of another successful strike. He looked at the tactical display, watching as more and more Council positions went dark. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're getting signals from some of the younger Council races. They're offering to join our side. They say humanity has shown them that the Council isn't invincible." Wells thought of Thompson's final message. "Remember, respond. Tell them we accept their help," he ordered, "and send word to Earth. Phase 1 is complete. The Council's outer defense ring is broken. We're ready to push toward their core worlds." The war was only beginning, but already the galaxy's balance of power had shifted. Humanity had remembered, and their response was just getting started. 3 months into the war, the Council finally realized the true extent of their mistake. They had thought humanity would fight like other advanced species, with energy weapons, shield systems, and AI-controlled fleets. Instead, humanity fought like survivors, using every dirty trick and forgotten weapon they could find. Admiral Wells stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching as another Council battle fleet fell into a human trap. The massive alien vessels, each one large enough to hold a small city, moved in perfect formation towards what they thought was a weakened human colony. "They took the bait," Wells said quietly. "Launch the mines." Thousands of simple nuclear devices, hidden in debris fields, activated at once. The Council ship's sensors, designed to detect energy weapons, had completely missed them. Confirmed direct hits, his tactical officer reported. Their shields are down. Moving to Phase 2. Small human ships appeared from hidden positions in nearby asteroids. These weren't the huge warships the Council used, but converted civilian vessels. Mining ships, cargo haulers, even old space tugs. Each one had been stripped down and packed with weapons. Remember, Wells transmitted to his fleet, hit and run. Don't let them adapt to our patterns. The human ships struck from all directions, firing primitive but devastating weapons. Rail guns launched metal slugs at near-light speed. Nuclear missiles overwhelmed the Council's tracking systems. Some ships even used modified mining lasers, cutting through the alien vessels' now unshielded hulls. In the Council's main command center, the High Speaker watched in horror as another fleet was torn apart. "How are they everywhere at once?" he demanded. "Our sensors show no major fleet movements." "That's the problem," his military advisor said, shoulders slumped in defeat. "They're not moving large fleets. They're using small ships, hiding them in civilian traffic and debris fields. Our scanning systems are too advanced. They're programmed to look for high-energy drives and weapon signatures, not these primitive methods." On a dozen screens, more battles played out. Council forces, used to fighting with precise AI targeting and energy weapons, found themselves overwhelmed by human unpredictability. Ships that should have been easy targets vanished into debris fields. Weapons that should have been obsolete centuries ago tore through their best defenses. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "we're losing contact with more colonies. The younger races, they're revolting, using human tactics." The High Speaker felt his world crumbling. 10,000 years of Council dominance, undone in 3 months by a species they'd dismissed as primitives. Back in human space, Lisa Thompson coordinated with Earth's new allies. Former Council slave races, inspired by humanity's success, provided crucial intelligence about Council weaknesses. Some even began building their own primitive weapons, following Earth's example. "Another Council fleet just surrendered," her aide reported. They're saying they want to defect. Their crews are mostly from younger races. They've seen what happened to the other fleets." Lisa nodded, thinking of her father. He had died exposing the Council's corruption, but he'd also shown the galaxy that the mighty Council could bleed. On his command ship, Wells received the latest victory reports. Human forces had pushed halfway to the Council's core worlds. Their supply lines were in chaos. Their once mighty fleets were scattered or destroyed. And now their own member races were turning against them. "Sir," his communications officer spoke up. "Message from Earth Command. They're calling this Operation Thompson. They say it's time for Phase 3. Wells looked at the tactical display, where the Council's capital system glowed like a distant target. "Send word to all ships," he ordered. "The Council forced us into this war. Now we're going to end it. Set course for their home system." In the darkness of space, thousands of human ships began to move. The Council had started this war by burning one human alive. Humanity's response had burned their empire to ash. And now it was time to finish the job. The Council's capital system was supposed to be impregnable. 3 rings of defense stations, powered by artificial suns. Fleets of the most advanced warships ever built. Sensor arrays that could detect a meteor from light years away. None of it mattered. Human ships appeared inside the defense rings, rising out of their hiding places in cargo vessels that had been quietly arriving for weeks. Council sensors, searching for advanced drive signatures, had ignored the primitive chemical rockets these ships used for short-range movement. "All ships, execute final attack plan," Admiral Wells commanded from his flagship. "Remember why we're here." The battle that followed would be studied for centuries. Human vessels, many of them civilian ships converted for war, struck from every direction at once. They fought like Earth's ancient guerrilla warriors, appearing suddenly, striking hard, vanishing into debris fields before the Council's targeting computers could lock on. In the Council's central station, the High Speaker watched his perfect defense crumble. "How did they get so many ships past our sensors?" he demanded. "They hid them in plain sight," his tactical officer replied, voice shaking. "In cargo containers, in asteroid chunks, even powered down and drifting with space junk. We were looking for an advanced fleet. They sent us scattered pieces and assembled them inside our defenses. A massive explosion lit up space. One of the artificial suns powering the defense rings went dark, its containment systems destroyed by precisely targeted nuclear strikes. We have to evacuate," someone shouted. "They're inside all our defensive perimeters." But as the Council leaders rushed to their escape vessels, they found their paths blocked. The younger races they had suppressed for so long had turned against them. In corridors and docking bays across the station, security forces faced their own soldiers. Lisa Thompson stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the battle unfold. Her vessel wasn't a warship but a diplomatic one, carrying representatives from Earth and their alien allies. They waited as human forces systematically disabled the Council's defenses. "Your father would be proud," Representative Third said, standing beside her. The small alien who had tried to warn James Thompson now served as a liaison between Earth and the liberated races. "He showed us their weakness," Lisa replied. "Not their technology, their arrogance. They were so convinced of their superiority that they never imagined primitives could threaten them." Hours later, Wells' voice came over the command channel. "Capital Station secured. Council leadership captured. You're clear to dock, Ambassador Thompson." Lisa led the diplomatic team into the Council chamber where her father had died. The room had been repaired, but she could still feel the weight of what had happened here. The Council leaders, now prisoners, watched as she took the Speaker's position. "6 months ago, you murdered my father in this room," she began. "You thought it would frighten humanity into submission. Instead, it united us. United all of us." She gestured to the representatives of various species around her. "Today, we're not here for revenge. We're here for justice. The Galactic Council is disbanded. In its place, we're establishing the Galactic Assembly, where all spacefaring species will have equal voice and equal rights." She looked at the former Council leaders. "You will stand trial for your crimes, not just against humanity, but against every species you've suppressed and exploited. But you'll receive something you never gave my father: a fair hearing." The chamber, once a place of corruption and death, began its transformation. Over the following days, representatives from hundreds of worlds arrived, elder races and young species working together as equals for the first time in galactic history. Admiral Wells attended the Assembly's first official session. Watching Lisa Thompson guide the proceedings, he thought about how far they'd come. The Council had tried to make an example of humanity. They had succeeded, just not in the way they intended. Humanity had shown the galaxy that true strength didn't come from advanced technology or ancient traditions. It came from determination, adaptability, and the willingness to stand up against injustice, no matter the cost. The stars looked different now. Not distant points of light controlled by an ancient elite, but a field of possibilities open to all. A new age had begun, born from one man's sacrifice and humanity's response. They had remembered, they had responded, and now they would lead the way forward.